Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode 13 of the Blues News podcast. Today, I'm here with David from the Maidenhead United Supporters Group. Firstly, David, how are you doing?
Yeah, all good, thank you. Much happier with our recent form. So yeah, good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, definitely looks like going into this game, you're probably on the better form than Southend, which is probably a first, definitely in recent years. So, how does that feel going into the game, knowing that you're probably on the better form out of the two sides?
Yeah, I mean we've had a pretty tough sort of start to the season in terms of points that we've gained. I think our run has been quite favourable in terms of fixtures, but it just hasn't happened in terms
Yeah.
of getting points. So I mean the last couple of games we've beat some fellow sort of strugglers in terms of Boston this weekend and then ipswich in the week. So yeah, it's good for everybody's confidence, to be honest.
Well, yeah, obviously playing two teams that aren't doing very well at all this season. I think it's fair to say, but those are the sort of games that you need to be winning. If you can't win those, then that's you're never going to survive. And for a team like Maidenhead, you're probably not looking to get points against Barnet. You're looking for those vital points against the smaller clubs like ipswich and Boston. So what I wanted to we'll move on a little bit. So obviously we spoke about your start to the season a little bit already, but obviously it was a poor start to the season with three losses, you know, against Eastleigh, Solihull, and 𝗘𝗨𝗦𝗚. So obviously quite good teams. What did you make of your start to the season?
Yeah, it was disappointing really. We had a really decent sort of pre-season, so everyone was buoyed and quite sort of optimistic in terms of where we'd finish within the league. But yeah, once we kicked off the campaign, it just didn't wasn't really sort of happening. It's for a smaller club. We lost quite a few of our better players, I think, in the summer, and naturally it's quite hard to bring in sort of replacements, being a sort of hybrid team. And like most teams, they do tend to pick up a few injuries, but we picked up some really substantial ones where players are out for quite a few months. So we've had to dip a lot more into the loan market. So it was a tough old start.
Well, one result that stands out to me when I was doing research for this podcast and sort of looking into Maidenhead starts the season was game week 5 when one of the most shocking results probably of the season so far in the National League when you beat Barnet 3-1. So what happened with that game? I don't even know what to ask really. What happened in that game?
Yeah, I mean, it's our record against Barnet is atrocious. We really don't tend to pick up anything against them over the years, but I think we really pressured them in the first half, really passed the ball nicely, and took advantage of them. I think whether or not they thought we would be easy meat, but defensively against us, they were dreadful and played right into our hands on the counter. So yeah, we're exceptional in the first half, and then played our typical. We defended solidly and then waited for a mistake and made it 3-1 and rode out the game quite easily. So, yeah, it's one of those you turn up and think, who knows what's going to happen? We might be on the wrong end here, but then we turn up and get a result. So, yeah, it was a good one.
Yes, brilliant result. And I think one thing that I've been talking a lot about from a Southend perspective in recent podcasts is the sort of what expectations can do to a club. And I think we've been really on the receiving end of that this season. Is like last season, I've been saying that last season it was, pretty much try and stay up. If we stay up, it's a miracle because of obviously the points deduction, everything that was going on behind the scenes. But this season, it's like we're expected to try and get in the playoffs. Some people saying top 3. There's big expectations. I think probably that played a part in Barnet's starts the season because their starts the season it wasn't terrible, but it wasn't quite what you'd expect it to
Yeah.
be. And obviously, they dropped quite a few points. But now, obviously, I'm not sure about the table right now, but they were top the other day. So they've definitely turned it around. So
Yeah. I think
it's
they brought
quite
in a lot of
interesting to
players
see.
as well, didn't they?
Yeah, they brought in loads of players, and they're a club that it's always difficult when a club brings in a lot of players, like you said, because you sort of think Are they going to gel? Are they going to do well? But yeah, it seems like they're starting to gel, and we've gone off the tangent to talk about Barnet somehow in a Maidenhead and Southend podcast. But it's definitely going to be interesting to see how they gel throughout the whole season.
Definitely.
So one thing I wanted to talk about is with Maidenhead, they seem like a club where you see the predictions before the season, and virtually every season people say Maidenhead relegated or just about staying up. And somehow it seems every year Maidenhead managed to survive. I think you've been in the National League about 8 years now. So what is the key to you staying in the National League for this long?
I mean, we've got a very astute manager. Alan Devonshire's been there, so and he's done it. I mean, this is his second sort of stint with us. He's got some 800 games in the National League. He knows what he's doing. He manages to get results.
Yep.
And I think last year we had a superb sort of transfer window in general. So we brought in a good mix of promising youngsters and experience. And we just do enough, I think, to sort of sneak over the line. We go through some bad runs, and then we go on a good sort of streak, and we do enough. It's you just got to be realistic with your expectations, I think, because as a club and what we've got, small crowds, we don't have a lot of like revenue generating opportunities based on our sort of ground. But we manage to. He gets people that Alan Devonshire gets people that puts in a shift. That's the basic requirement, and sprinkled with a little bit of quality as well.
Yeah, you said about Maidenhead doing enough, and it definitely sort of seems like that is pretty much been Maidenhead for the past about 8 years, just doing enough, surviving. Do you see a time where Maidenhead could possibly push to those sort of playoffs or push on beyond just doing enough? And also, what do you think sort of needs to be done to try and get there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the ideal for us really would be to go to full-time football. That would help sort of maybe grow the club. I mean, we've had some terrible challenges with our local council. They haven't supported the club. We've been looking to move grounds. Space near us is really, really limited. I mean, most of the town centre has gone up to sort of flats and apartments. And we've got a local sort of sports centre within half a mile. That would have been perfect for us to actually increase the size of the ground, and then also to support all the brilliant sort of youth clubs like ladies, juniors, futsal, all the other teams that we do. It would have been the perfect home for us. But the council have never supported the club, and it's made our life difficult to grow. I think to add to that, I mean, in the summer, you might have heard that we benefited from revenue from Max Kilman getting sold from Wolverhampton to West Ham, which is £4 million that goes towards the club over, we don't know how many years, probably 4 years plus. And it's just how the club invests that into the whole infrastructure of Maynard. It won't just be for the seniors, because there's lots of other clubs and infrastructure to support. But yeah, I think aspirations, if we were to go full time, then that could, maybe us being a bit more realistic and ambitious. But at the moment, I think, look, if we're able to stay up and finish as high as possible, that has to be our realistic goals.
Definitely. Well, you mentioned the Max Kilman deal, obviously a brilliant deal for Maidenhead especially. So how you touched on it briefly already, but how important do you think that, like £4 million, I think you said it was, how important do you think that'll be coming into Maidenhead?
Oh, it's absolutely massive. I mean, when would we ever see that kind of money? It'd be just, it's revenue that you'd get over multiple seasons, but then you don't have any of the costs of, outlay for players and maintenance and things like that. So it's guaranteed £4 million. It's just, how best to support the infrastructure of the club. We've just got the key thing for the club really is to try and be sustainable. It'll be foolish just to blow all the money and go full time and paying silly salaries, because we don't have the same revenue coming in. So it's just got to be a wise investment. Unfortunately, we do have a really decent sort of chairman, so hopefully we make the right decision.
Hopefully, and hopefully that £4 million can go towards making Maidenhead eventually a full-time club. That would be brilliant. It's a funny league, National League, because a lot of the teams are full-time, and then you get some that are part-time. It's a bit of a weird old league because you get a team like Barnet full-time, and then you get a team like Maidenhead who are part-time, and then Maidenhead go and beat them 3-1. It's just a very strange league, I think, sometimes, but also quite an exciting league. However you take it. So one thing that I wanted to talk about, and probably one of the things I was most excited about talking about before the podcast, is the history of Maidenhead. Because when you look at it, I believe you were founded in 1870. So that's that's an incredibly old club. I mean, Southend were founded in 1906. And what makes it even more impressive is that you've been at York Road, your current ground, since about 1871. So pretty much one of the oldest continually used grounds in the world. How important is York Road to sort of like the integrity of your club?
Yeah, it's like it's quite a sort of a tricky one because everyone's sort of attached to the ground. We do like it for its its sort of values, but it is quite sort of knackered by now. Hasn't really had sort of much investment, and we are sort of like landlocked. But we've got a train station to one side, and then a growing number of flats and buildings sort of pushing us in. But it's got its sort of unique charm. It's always weird when you look back at old sort of YouTube videos of our games from like the 90s, and not much has actually changed. But yeah, it does limit us in terms of revenue generating sort of days. But yeah, it's got its own sort of charm. But most people who turn up, they're like, what on earth is this? But yeah, you've got to accept different grounds and everything that you sort of go to in a season.
I've been to York Road myself a couple of times, and it is it's definitely a ground with character. And I think where you have like behind the goal, which says Maidenhead and stuff, I think it looks quite cool. But as you said, it is a bit knackered. But I can't speak much because we do have Roots Hall, and that is falling down at the moment. So I won't speak too much about stadiums. But it was just really interesting how old of a club Maidenhead are. I'm sure they're one of the oldest, if not the oldest in the league, probably 1870. I can't imagine there's many clubs that are older. So it's just really interesting that they've got so much history and such an old club. But, as you said, part-time and just about doing enough in National League. So hopefully things like that, Max Kilman money, again, that we were talking about, hopefully things like that can sort of change Maidenhead and, give them an option to create more history. So I'd like to talk about obviously the season as a whole. So we've spoken about it a little bit. Obviously, every season, Maidenhead doing just about enough. Do you think this will be another season of Maidenhead just about doing enough, or do you think you could maybe aim a bit higher?
I mean, I think in amongst fans, you just got to be realistic. I think to finish above the drop zone, it's always like you go on a few runs and then everyone's like, sniffing around the playoffs. But I think just being sort of realistic, I think with the squad that we've got in comparison with sort of previous years, I ain't pitching for too high in the league. Everyone's got their slightly different views. So yeah, it was an interesting one way saying like it was a shock for us to beat Barnet. I mean, we had like over the past few years tremendous records against sort of Chesterfield and Wrexham, some of the bigger teams, but we managed to sort of perform against them. So yeah, this year our wins have come against the some of the lower teams as well as Barnet. But yeah, I'm not pitching for too high. It's keep grinding out those wins and just keeping our noses clear of the drop zone.
Well, I'll flip the question slightly. So, I asked, how will Maidenhead do this season? So, obviously, it's a Southend podcast. So, I'm going to ask you, what do you think of Southend's chances this season?
I think like before the season, I thought sort of the optimism with everything sort of going on and around the club and putting everything behind you from previous years. I probably had you maybe in the top like between 4 and 6. So yeah, to see where you're at the moment is a little bit of a surprise. But I mean, we're only just over a third of the way through the season. I haven't got tremendous knowledge in terms of how you've been performing sort of this year. I see your occasional sort of threads on X and Twitter after a game and things like that, and there's probably a bit of frustration, as well as I think your most recent game against Gateshead, I think it was, soundly beaten according to quite a few of your
Yep,
home fans. But
certainly.
it's, yeah, it'd be interesting to know what's acceptable to you guys with all the Ron Martin stuff behind you. Is it consolidation this year, or would you expect more? I probably would have expected more.
Yeah, well, definitely. And I spoke about it earlier with the expectations of fans changing and stuff, and how much of an impact that can have on the team. But to be honest, I think a lot of people overlook how like unlucky we've been this season with injuries and all sorts going on. We've lost Harry Caldwell, who was our best striker,
Yeah,
a key member of the team. Ollie Kensdale had to leave for unknown circumstances. So he had to leave the club. We've also had injuries. We've had 𝗘𝟭🯬𝗚, Coca, so many injuries to even list. And it has been a tough time. But I think if we can get our players back strong and fit, players like Miley, Ralph was suspended last game. If we get players like that back, we'll be a really strong team. But I think this is probably one of the best times for you to play Southend. And we'll talk about it in a bit. But I think Southend are probably quite a bogey team for Maidenhead, certainly in the last four. But we'll get on to that. But I think it's probably the best time for you to play Southend, really, right now, because we have so many injuries. Some are starting to come back, but really we've got too many injuries. So it's probably quite a good time for you to play Southend at the moment.
I thought when we played you last year was supposed to be a good period when you had about less than 11 players, but it didn't work out that way.
Not quite. Well, I touched on it before. Obviously, in the last four games, it's quite weird when you look at the head-to-head with Southend and Maidenhead for the last four games. It's sort of every game is a Southend win, but they're all like 2-1 or 2-0. Every single game we scored 2 goals, which is just a bit weird. But do you consider Southend a bit of a bogey team for Maidenhead?
Yeah, pretty much so. We don't tend to get sort of too many points. I think we did all right in your first season down. I think we drew at your place when we were in a bad run, and then we won at ours. But other than that, it's scant reward for us. So I'm hoping we can turn up and do something.
Well, I hope not. So
Yeah, no, that's fair.
Are you coming to the Southend game? No,
I'm
Southend.
not sure if I can make this one. It's a bit of a tricky thing with lots of other stuff sort of going on. So I might have to send my best wishes with the rest of the fans.
Well, to be fair, I'm not sure I can go either, which is surprising because I live in Kent, so quite away from Southend, but I still go to pretty much every home game. I think I've missed like one this season, and
Okay.
but I think I'm going to have to miss this one, which is a shame. So,
Right.
are there any players at Southend that stick out to you in particular?
In terms of watching and note, it would have been Carwell, but I suppose he's obviously sort of departed.
Yep,
Um, Obviously, there's your goal scoring machine who we should
yep,
probably sort of man mark because he's getting half your goals. Scott
yep,
Moraes, I think it is.
yep.
But I'm not too sure on the rest. But I think Moraes is the one that's getting most of the headlines so far.
Yeah, oh yeah, certainly. He scored 9 goals. He's scored in more. Obviously, it's a bit of a strange stat because we're pretty much the only team, the only league in the country who have played as many games as this. But he's scored in more games than anyone in England at the moment. So it's not a
And that's
bad
pretty
stat to have as a
decent.
right back.
I'm quite curious how your two players. I've got some friends that are Leighton Orient fans, so I'm quite interested to see how 𝗘𝟏🯬🗚
Yep,
gets on, and I think Macaulay-Bonne.
yep.
But
Oh,
I think the former is probably a bit unfit, but obviously
yep.
huge quality when he is. And Macaulay-Bonne has scored a lot of goals in his time, but I'm not sure what he's doing at the moment. I don't think he's got off the mark really for you guys yet.
Well, it's interesting you say that because they're two players of quite a point of discussion, really. Because Moncur he's been brilliant, really. I mean, you can see his quality. It's so obvious when he's playing how good he is, and I think his fitness has definitely improved since he's joined. At the start, it was a bit ropey, as you can expect, but he's definitely improved his fitness. But I think his biggest issue is definitely shooting. I mean, he's had some very questionable moments with shooting, but I think for the most part, 𝗘𝗭𝟯 has been a huge success already. I mean, he's been brilliant.
Yeah.
He's one of those players that you shouldn't look at stats when you sort of look at Monker, because he's just been brilliant, just driving games forward. And 𝗗𝗨𝗦𝗚's a difficult one. I think he's only played about 4 or 5 games probably, but
Oh, okay.
he's definitely. It's been a relatively slow start, but we are on poor form and a lot of our players are out. So when they're fit, it'll be a bit easier to see what he's like. But you can definitely see there's a quality player in there. But I think,
Yeah.
again, fitness is probably a bit of an issue there. But obviously that'll come with time. But I'm excited about 𝗗𝗨𝗦𝗚 and 𝗘𝗭𝟯 to see how they do, because you can
Yeah, good
definitely see there.
acquisitions, I think. Yeah, good
Yeah,
acquisitions for the National League.
definitely. And it's good to get a bit of experience because we've got a very young squad. So it's good to get a bit of experience in there. So lastly, I would like to talk about the game itself, obviously. So what players of Maidenhead should we be looking out for on Saturday?
I mean, from our season so far, it really has been a mix. I don't think there has been anyone particularly sort of outstanding. Always sort of Reece Smith for us is probably our starlet. Plays just off the strikers. Yeah, he's Maisie runner, great little player, scored a good goal at the weekend. He's always one to watch out. Um, Again, it depends whether we've got some of our key players back from injury, so I won't mention them because they might not play. Um, and then we've got some rapid strikers that are hitting a bit of form at the moment. So if they're played incorrectly, then hopefully Sean Mikulski can carry on his run. And 𝗘𝗭𝗏 Abrahams is our top scorer. He's got 4, but he's worked his backside off this season. So hopefully he can sort of continue that sort of run.
Well, you mentioned him already there, and there's actually 2 players that I wanted to talk about in particular because they both played for Southend before. One,
Yeah.
I believe, is pretty much just joined. But starting off, how has Sean Mikulski been for Maidenhead?
Bit of a this season or in general?
Just in general, really, because I think we
General.
had him probably in like 20. God, testing my knowledge. I was probably 2018 roughly when we
Us
had
going
Sean
back a little
Mikulski
bit.
for
Yeah.
about a season.
So I suppose last year it was a bit of a hit and miss season. He was out injured for like quite a long time, and then sort of coming off the bench and not really being given too much of an opportunity. But then he ended the season really, really well. With something like 4 in his last 5. So he's someone who'll go on streaks.
Yep.
He's pretty rapid. Just needs to work on being a bit classy with his finishing sometimes. But he's turned that round in the last couple of games with a couple of goals. And did you have one other player, did you say?
Yep, Nathan Ferguson. He's just joined, I believe. But how has he
Yeah.
been so far?
Actually, we've been really sort of impressed. It got, I don't know, some strange comments, I think, from 𝗗𝗏𝗏 fans in terms of coming for us, but
Yeah.
he's added a bit of class, I think, in midfield. He's quite sort of a languid midfielder, but when he sort of gets on the ball, he's got good distribution. And he was certainly my man of the match the weekend. So I think he's been a good addition in the midfield. Yeah, sometimes you don't notice him, but he does a lot of the good stuff. So yeah, hopefully he'll carry that on as the season goes on.
But yeah, he sounds quite similar to how he played at Southend, really. And we didn't have him for too long, but he was a good player. I always quite liked Nathan Ferguson. It's quite this is part of the reason why I love doing these sort of podcasts with opposition fans. Firstly, to hear a bit about your club and get a bit of more of an insight going into the game, but also to hear about ex-players, because it is surprising when you look at how many ex-Southend players are in the league playing against us on a weekly basis. It's quite funny. So when I
Yeah,
saw that Nathan
I think we
Ferguson
got 2 others as well who played at your at Southend. We got Sam Barrett.
all right, yeah,
So he's obviously back
yep,
now at us. Hasn't had too much sort of game time this year, but yeah, he had a little stint, unfortunately injury prone, had some really bad injuries, I think, during his time at Southend.
yep.
And then also prior to that, I think he had 𝗘𝗏𝗏, I believe.
All
I'm
right,
not
yeah.
sure what year. Must
I
be
was
going
going to
back
say, I
maybe a
thought there
decade.
were some others, but I just couldn't remember them
Yeah,
quite. But yeah, I thought there were some others. But again, it's just funny how there's 4, possibly even more that I missed that
yeah. It's a
played
happy
for
hunting
Maidenhead.
ground. We go shopping at Southend quite a lot.
Yeah. So, lastly, a question that I always think is quite interesting to ask is going into the game. We sort of want to know, what is Maidenhead's sort of style of play?
It's fairly rugged. So if you want pretty football and whatever, you're not going to get it. Is we tend to try and play in the right areas. So we're not going to go side to side at the back. It's getting it in the channels, closing you down, and then trying to make the most of those opportunities that come up. We'll try and be quite a sort of a defensive team. So yeah, it's quite a rugged sort of approach, but it tries to make best use of our sort of resources and team.
Well, I think there's probably one more thing to ask you. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I
That's
really
okay.
appreciate it. It's been really, really interesting to talk to you. And again, it was one that I was really interested about because you've got quite a lot of Southend players. Obviously, the history of Maidenhead is really quite long. And yeah, it was one that I was really interested about. So, lastly, you probably know what's coming. So, I'll ask, what is your score prediction for Saturday?
I've got something in my blood tells me it's going to be 1-1.
Okay. Okay. Well, we probably, I don't know. I don't think Southend fans would be too happy with that. I think we,
Yeah,
we definitely need a win at the moment, but 1-1, fair enough.
yeah.
Perfect. Well, thank you for coming on, David. I'll leave the details to the work that you do with the Maidenhead United Supporters Group below. People can check that out. It's brilliant. So yeah, thank you for coming on, David. Is there
Yeah,
anything you want to say
appreciated.
before I end the podcast?
No, thanks very much. Obviously, it's good to have a bit of a presence. So thanks for asking us to come on board. I tried to get some other fans on board, but they all sort of ran away, so you had to put up with me.
Perfect. Well, thank you, David. If everyone did enjoy, please make sure to like and subscribe, and I'll see you all in the next one.